Welcome to Life Stories, where the people we love the most are sometimes the ones who hurt us the deepest. Imagine building an empire from nothing, only to walk into a wedding and realize the bride is the sister who once stole everything from you and pretended you didn't exist. But this isn't a story about revenge. It's about something far more powerful. What happens when truth walks into a room that's been living on lies? In the next few minutes, you'll step into a world of secrets, shattered facades, and quiet resilience. A world where silence speaks louder than anger, and walking away might be the bravest thing someone can do. So grab a moment of quiet, because this story will stay with you long after the screen fades to black. Let's begin. Avery Monroe hadn't planned on coming. Not really. The ivory envelope with its raised gold lettering had sat unopened for days, collecting dust on her kitchen counter like a time bomb. She'd told herself she was too busy, that Metasite was entering a critical phase of expansion, that her son had swimming lessons. But now, as she stood beneath the crystal chandeliers of the Marlowe Bay Resort's grand ballroom, Avery couldn't deny it. Curiosity had won. Curiosity, and maybe something darker. The air smelled of orchids and old money. Polished marble gleamed beneath her Valentino heels, and the murmurs of mingling guests felt like whispers in a courtroom. Her husband, Marcus Blake, rested a steady hand at the small of her back. The gentle weight of it grounded her, even as the pressure in her chest threatened to explode. "Breathe," he whispered, eyes scanning her face like he used to scan patients in surgery, searching for unseen wounds. Her son, Ethan, tugged at his bow tie with theatrical despair. "Mom, this thing's trying to choke me." Avery knelt, smoothing the fabric with a smile. "Just for a little while, buddy. Remember our deal? Good behavior now, cannonballs later." And then the crowd parted. Her breath caught in her throat before she understood why. A laugh, bright, false, familiar, rose from the other side of the room, and there she was. Charlotte, her sister, the bride. It had been 11 years since Avery had last seen her. 11 years since she was cast out of the Monroe household like a stain no one wanted to admit was blood. Charlotte looked radiant, of course, the kind of effortless beauty born from generational wealth and carefully curated lies. She held a champagne flute in one hand, her head tilted back in laughter, an old gesture Avery remembered from childhood. It was what Charlotte did when she was performing. And Charlotte was always performing. Their eyes met across the ballroom. Charlotte froze. So did Avery. She hadn't recognized the name on the invitation. Nathan Caldwell. She hadn't known Charlotte had dropped Monroe altogether, distancing herself even from the name she'd used to ascend. But Avery knew, now. Knew exactly who her sister had married. Knew that Nathan was one of the lead cardiologists at Hudson Mercy Medical, a hospital that had been courting her company for months. Her fingers tightened around her glass. She hadn't come to make a scene. But maybe the truth didn't need a spotlight. Maybe all it needed was her presence. Charlotte's gasp cut through the music like a needle on vinyl. Heads turned. Nathan followed his bride's line of sight, confusion creeping across his refined features. Avery stood tall, her posture unyielding in her charcoal silk dress. She felt Marcus shift beside her, ready to defend, ready to leave. But she shook her head slightly. Not yet. Her parents descended almost instantly. Margot and Franklin Monroe, New England's picture of dignified hypocrisy. Her mother's pearl earrings trembled with restrained fury. "What are you doing here?" she hissed, her smile a painted-on mask. "I was invited," Avery said evenly. "By the groom." Marcus stepped forward. "My wife is CEO of Metasite. Nathan invited us personally." The name rippled through the nearby circle of medical professionals like a dropped stone in a still lake. Whispers bloomed. Metasite, CEO. Monroe? A woman in a plum evening gown turned to her colleague. "That's Avery Monroe?" Her mother's mask slipped. Avery stood still, remembering the last time she saw those faces, rain clinging to her coat, suitcase in hand, as her father slammed the front door and told her not to come back unless she learned her place. She remembered the cold, the silence, the letter from the university. Her tuition fund depleted, transferred, gone. Now she stood wrapped in designer fabric, success woven into every stitch. Nathan approached slowly. His eyes darted between Avery and Charlotte, his smile faltering. "You know the CEO of Metasite?" he asked Charlotte, who had gone ghost pale. He turned back to Avery. "We've been trying to reach your team for weeks." Avery gave a gracious nod. "We've been selective." Charlotte tried to laugh, but the sound was hollow. "She's just my sister. It's been years." "I thought you said she dropped out of college," Nathan said, frowning. "She did," Margot interjected quickly. "She wasn't, well, she had potential but lacked discipline." Avery said nothing. She didn't need to. Dr. Sullivan, a medical director from Seattle General, suddenly appeared at her elbow. "Ms. Monroe, your talk last month in Boston was brilliant. Our post-op complications dropped 22% after implementing your protocols." Avery smiled. "Actually, we're at 27% now. We've just signed with Columbia Regional." Nathan's eyes flicked back to Charlotte. "Wait, you're that Avery Monroe?" The silence was suffocating. Charlotte's hand trembled against her champagne glass. She began, then stopped. "Didn't you say your sister was managing the family clinic in Vermont?" Nathan asked. She helped," Margot answered, too quickly. But Nathan wasn't looking at her. He was staring at Charlotte. "You told me you graduated from Columbia." "I did a hybrid program," she said, voice rising. "Remote courses." "Columbia doesn't offer remote degrees." That was the moment the mask cracked. Avery didn't move. She didn't gloat. She only offered a single soft line. "Congratulations, Charlotte." The flute in her hand caught the light and shattered. Right then, everyone in the room knew this wasn't just a surprise guest. This was a reckoning. Questions to ponder. 1. What do you think Avery should do now that she holds all the power? Stay silent or speak out? 2. Have you ever walked into a room only to uncover truths you weren't prepared to face? And just when Charlotte thought the worst was over, a new voice, quiet but firm, called her name from behind. "Avery." The voice behind her was quiet, too quiet. She turned slowly, already knowing who it would be. Charlotte stood a few feet away, no longer the composed bride, but a woman unraveling thread by thread. Her veil had been removed, her shoulders stiff beneath the lace of her gown, and her eyes, once so sure, were wide and flickering, like someone bracing for a storm they couldn't outrun. "Can we talk?" Charlotte's voice wavered. "Please, just for a minute." Avery glanced at Marcus, who gave a near-invisible nod. Ethan had gone off with his babysitter to hunt for cake, blissfully unaware of the emotional landmines around him. They slipped into a side corridor, the murmur of the reception fading into marble echoes. No crystal chandeliers here, just soft light, beige walls, and the faint scent of lemon polish. A hallway made for caterers and whispered secrets. "I didn't know you'd come," Charlotte said first, clutching her hands tightly at her waist like she was trying to hold herself together. "Nathan didn't tell me you were invited." "You never told him I existed," Avery replied, her voice calm. "So I imagine it was quite a surprise." Charlotte flinched. "I didn't know how to explain everything. He thinks I'm someone I'm not. But I had to become her, Avery. You don't understand what it's like." "Don't I?" Avery's tone was razor sharp, quiet and cutting. "You think I don't understand becoming someone you're not just to survive?" Charlotte's mouth opened, then closed. "You had our parents' support, their money, their networks. You had everything, and you still chose to build your story on my bones. I didn't mean to take your college fund." "But you did," Avery interrupted. "And when I found out, I got thrown out into the rain with nothing but a suitcase and a $100 checking account, while you were on a yacht in Cancun." Charlotte looked down. "I thought you'd be fine. You were always stronger." That stopped Avery. There it was, the truth that had always lurked beneath their rivalry. Charlotte had never believed Avery was fragile. She'd believed she was indestructible. The silence between them stretched, thick with old grief and unspoken blame. "Why now?" Avery asked. "Why come to me like this? You've made it 11 years without needing a sister." "I'm not here for sympathy," Charlotte said. When I saw you tonight, it all cracked. Everything I built, I don't know if any of it was ever really mine." Avery inhaled slowly. She had imagined this moment before, countless times. Charlotte on her knees, apologizing, begging for forgiveness. But this wasn't that. This was messier, sadder, more human. "Do you love him?" she asked. Charlotte blinked. "Nathan?" Avery nodded. Charlotte hesitated too long. "I don't know," she admitted. "I think I wanted to. I wanted him to love the version of me I tried to become. But now I see the way he looks at you, like he's seeing something real for the first time." Avery looked away. "I'm not here to take your husband, Charlotte." "I know," she whispered, "but he might walk away anyway." Avery could feel the fracture lines spreading beneath her sister's carefully constructed life. And for the first time in years, she didn't feel anger. She felt something closer to grief, for the girl Charlotte could have been, for the sister she never had. But the ache in her chest didn't dull the clarity in her spine. "I'm not here to fix your mess," she said, voice gentle but firm. "I've spent too long building a life where I don't have to clean up after people who hurt me." Charlotte nodded, tears catching on her lashes. "I deserve that." "I didn't say that," Avery said. But you need to figure out what kind of woman you want to be when no one's watching, because that's who Nathan's going to end up married to." A sharp knock echoed down the hallway. Marcus appeared at the corner. "Everything okay?" he asked. Avery nodded, brushing a stray curl behind her ear. "Yeah, we're done here." Charlotte stepped back, her voice almost too soft to hear. "I'm sorry." Avery didn't answer, not because she hadn't heard, but because sometimes silence was the only honest response. They returned to the ballroom, but the atmosphere had shifted. The warmth was gone from the music. The conversations quieter, warier. Guests had picked up on the tremor beneath the surface. And Nathan had seen too much. He stood by the bar, still in his wedding tux, looking not at his bride, but at the door Charlotte had just exited. His drink untouched, his jaw tense, his mind elsewhere. As Avery passed him, he spoke without turning. "She lied about everything, didn't she?" Avery paused. "You'll have to ask her." "She said you were a failure." Avery smiled faintly. "And now?" He turned, his expression unreadable. "Now I wonder what else I don't know." A new tension settled in the room, different from before. Not rooted in old betrayals, but in the present, the possibility of new choices, new consequences. Charlotte had spent years becoming someone she thought the world would love. And Avery? Avery had stopped needing the world's approval a long time ago. Have you ever looked at someone you once envied and realized you never wanted their life, only your own back? As the music played on and the ballroom lights dimmed, a quiet storm was gathering. Not in raised voices or broken glasses, but in the slow, certain shifting of loyalty. And someone, before the night was over, was going to walk away from everything. Don't miss what happens next. The letter arrived on a Tuesday. Avery hadn't expected it, though a part of her had been waiting. Like how you wait for thunder after lightning. It was cream-colored, hand-addressed, no return label, but the slanted cursive gave it away. Charlotte. Avery sat at the edge of her home office, her fingers brushing the envelope like it might burn her. Outside, Marcus was playing basketball with Ethan in the driveway, their laughter drifting in with the spring breeze. She could pretend not to notice the letter for a while longer. Pretend she didn't still carry the weight of that night, the tension in the air like a wound never quite closed. But she opened it. There was only one sheet of paper. Charlotte's handwriting was still immaculate, looping and delicate, as if she thought control could somehow redeem chaos. Avery, the clinic is gone, shut down last week. They found enough billing irregularities to open a full investigation. I didn't try to fight it. Nathan filed for annulment. He said he didn't recognize the woman he married, and he was right. I don't recognize her either. You were never the problem. I was taught to see you as a threat, as someone to outrun. But the truth is, I've spent my whole life chasing a version of success that was never mine to begin with. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I know better now. But I wanted you to hear it from me. I'm sorry. Charlotte. Avery folded the letter and slid it into the drawer beside her, next to the newspaper clipping about Metasite's latest expansion, and a photo of her younger self at graduation, alone in her cap and gown. Later that night, after Ethan had gone to bed and the house had settled into its nightly hush, Avery stepped out onto the porch. Marcus joined her without asking. They stood in silence for a while, shoulder to shoulder, watching the porch light flicker across the tops of the tomato plants. Ethan had insisted they grow so we can make real sauce like on cooking shows. She wrote? Marcus asked softly. Avery nodded. She's trying, she said. And what about you? Avery didn't answer right away. She thought about the hallway conversation, the wedding, the countless nights she'd spent wondering if she was wrong to let go, if she should have fought harder to belong to people who had never made space for her. I think I'm done needing things from her, she said finally. Or from any of them. Marcus reached for her hand, and they stood like that for a long while. Fingers intertwined, old wounds between them, but no longer bleeding. 2 months later, Avery stood backstage at the American Medical Innovation Conference in Chicago. Her keynote was in 10 minutes. Ethan had begged her to bring home one of the robot pen holders from the vendor booths. Marcus had kissed her cheek before she boarded the flight and said, "Go show them what quiet power looks like." And then she saw her. Charlotte. She was across the room, near the back, wearing navy scrubs, a badge clipped to her lanyard. Her hair was tied back, her face free of makeup. She looked like someone beginning again, raw, unsure, but present. Their eyes met. No drama, no apology, just recognition. Charlotte held a folder. Avery recognized the Metasite logo in the corner. It was the internship application Avery had sent anonymously. Not a favor, not an olive branch, just a doorway. Avery gave the smallest nod. Charlotte returned it. And that was it. After the speech, after the applause, the congratulations, the handshakes, Avery walked to her hotel, heels clicking on pavement still damp from spring rain. Her team had gone ahead to dinner. She told them she'd catch up. At the corner, she passed a homeless woman sitting on a torn sleeping bag with a cardboard sign. Lost everything, but not my hope. Avery paused. She reached into her coat pocket, pulled out her card, and knelt down. Metasite runs a re-entry program, she said gently. Housing, job training, mental health support. We've helped hundreds of women rebuild. The woman stared at her. I'm not promising anything, Avery added, but we'll listen and we'll try. She handed over the card. The woman took it like it was a lifeline. Avery rose and kept walking. The next morning, back home, Ethan raced into the garden in his pajamas. The tomato plants were blooming. The peppers needed water. The air smelled like wet soil and beginnings. Can I help plant the new seeds today? He asked, holding up the tiny paper packet. Avery smiled, kneeling beside him. Of course, buddy. She pressed her hand into the dirt, the earth cool and soft beneath her fingertips. You know, she said, some plants don't do well next to others. They need space to grow right. Ethan nodded solemnly, like this was the most important thing he'd ever heard. Like people? He asked. Avery met his eyes. Exactly. As sunlight broke across the backyard, she realized that not all stories needed revenge to feel complete. Some just needed truth, and enough space to grow beyond the hurt. What touched you most about Avery's journey? Comment 100 if this story spoke to you. Where in the world are you watching from? Tag someone who needs to hear this story and share it with them.